This is episode 176 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome to episode 176 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today I have Dan Illes on the show, and Dan is a very technical real estate investor, primarily a real estate developer. And he also talked about some of the technical stuff he does with water metering on this podcast. So some of you who have been following this podcast for a while probably reached out to me and asked me about who does my sub-metering, because I have a duplex where I wanted to have a separate meter usage so I could bill it back to tenants. Dan was actually a guy that helped me out with that. And then he actually, after the fact, sort of started up a company around that. So he talks a little bit about that on this show, which I thought was kind of useful. He's not paying me to say that. It's just something I thought was useful. On the development side of things, Dan talked about how he buys multiple properties and does infill development. He also works with a fellow investor that's been on this podcast before, Charles Waugh. So Dan does a similar strategy, and he's also partnered with those guys. And it's very interesting to see how he's made progress over the years. With that said, I want to mention that if you're new to real estate investing, it's great to go right back to episode 1, because we've had so many great episodes with so many great investors that have shared their stories. And that information is right there for you to use and apply in your own real estate investing activities. So I highly recommend you take the time to do that if you haven't done that already. And if you wouldn't mind, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Please give it a 5-star. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. And if you could leave a comment, that'll just help more people to find the show. So without further ado, let's jump into episode 176 with Dan Illes. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Dan Illes. Got it right?
You got it right.
On the show. And Dan and I connected about a year and a half ago. He helped me out with some stuff, some water metering solutions, which we're going to talk about on this show, and everything else Dan's up to. So he's an investor primarily. And you're going to tell me the story, Dan. So rather than me tell it, you go ahead.
Sure. I've been investing for about 4 or 5 years now, and I've done a bunch of different types of investments, but my bread and butter has kind of been severing properties, little infill developments, and flipping land. So that's kind of where I've made my forte. The other thing I do as well, which you alluded to, is I do provide water sub-metering solutions for other landlords and property managers as well.
Yeah, so we'll go one chunk at a time. So the water meter thing, I don't even remember why we connected over that. Maybe you just brought it up to me because I was asking, I'm like, does anyone have a solution? Because when you have a duplex and you don't want to pay the $30,000 to add in an extra service, you have to have something. So you had this sub-metering solution that you were using. You suggested it to me. I bought it. And then you started becoming the Canadian dealer, I think, for this.
I did. I started out as a customer with my own duplex, very similar to your own. I had a lot of interest in it from other investors. So I connected with the manufacturer and started offering that to other investors. So
yeah, it's a little on the techie side, but you've been able to help me with that. And I like that I can actually more specifically charge the water now, because it was a constant battle with the tenants. They're like, they're watering their lawns, they're doing this, they're filling a pool. You know, we're not using 40% of the water, they're using all of it. And you know what? They were right, because I had it 60-40 and it should have been 70-30. So.
I was blown away when I saw kind of the water usage at your duplex personally. Yeah. There was quite the split on that. And I guess just to your point about the $30,000 for a new water service, you're correct. A lot of cities won't even let you bring a second service in. A lot of cities won't even let you put a second public meter on it. So what I've been providing people is a solution to kind of sub-meter your water yourself and pass cost along to tenants. So where a lot of landlords are trying to do a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, this actually tracks the exact water usage, and you can invoice your tenants based on what they actually use.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And this is not a paid promo. I haven't received any money for this, but it's just been useful. So I've had people ask, so I'm sharing this. But I'm able to go online. You shared with me like this little portal. I can go online. I can see exactly date ranges. So I'll just get like 3 months of bills, or now my assistant is doing it monthly. She'll just track, hey, this is a 28-day period. Let's track water usage over this. And then she gets a percentage and she just multiplies it out and sends off the numbers. There's still a bit of work to do. Like, the negative of it is it's quite a bit of administration to bill back water. So if most people, like if you don't have a lot of rentals, it works. If you're doing it on a lot, you might want to have an assistant doing that for you because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd add to that. Like if your city were to give you 2 public meters, that is still the best way to go. This is kind of a next best solution to that. Yeah. One experience I've had with my own property where I'm using it is you can see the water usage day by day, week by week, month by month. I had my lower unit move a tenant in without telling me, and you could spot exactly which day they had someone move in because you could just see the water usage go up and stay up. So it's a good way to also keep tenants accountable should they be abusing water, which is going to abuse your fixtures, and it can ultimately just kind of help you have a better idea of what's going on behind the walls of your investment.
Unfortunately, I feel like it's kind of hard to do anything about that. Like I'm pretty sure we were just talking about one of my tenants because you know him now. And I feel like he's got like another family living in there with him to split his rent up, which isn't fantastic. But yes, I could tell from the water, but what am I going to do about that? I mean, I guess maybe there is something I can do about that, but I mean, he's the tenant. He can kind of use the unit as he sees fit.
I think you'd have to have something off the get-go in your lease that addresses water usage and consumption and how much. Like, I think that would kind of be the best way to
Right. Well, in this case, they've agreed to just be billed what they're actually using. So it's not without its headaches, right? But I mean, I think for all these people who buy these Hamilton duplexes and they have 1 meter, many are fine with the 60-40 split, but then occasionally you're going to get a tenant that's going to make your life very unenjoyable because that's what you're doing. So this is a good alternative. But yeah, like you said, municipal's best. The reason that I found out that wouldn't work for me is there's like a frontage fee that you have to pay, and then you have to pay a city's hired excavator to dig into the road, which is going to be like $5,000 on that portion. And then I'd have to pay my own excavator to bring in the water line, and I'd have to tee it outside the house. Or sorry, you can't tee it. You actually have to have 2 separate lines come in off the main. So I have my existing one off the main, and I have to come in right off the main with a new one, which is all nonsense. Like really, we could just put 2 city meters inside, but they won't allow that. So
occasionally a city will allow the 2 meters.
Yeah, some will. London won't.
Yep. And yeah, just to your point there, what the city specifically looks for is they want to be able to shut water off to each individual unit. So they're going to want a curb stop, which is essentially the water operation valve that you see in your front yard. And they're going to want 2 of them either in a Y or a T situation, or like you said, an actual separate water line.
Yeah, coming off the main. Yeah, so some of it makes sense. The whole frontage fee, which is basically like the equivalent of a development charge, that was going to be like $8,000 or $10,000 plus everything else. I'm just like, okay, yeah, you guys are not playing ball. Whereas other cities, I believe Welland, it's like no problem. They'll just give it to you. And I don't know if they have the demand for the shut off. So, I mean, people interested in this, just check with your municipality first, because obviously city meter's best. But if, secondary solution would be this. Okay, so then the next thing I wanted to talk about, well, you're doing a lot of stuff. But maybe just give me the backstory. Like, what were you doing as a full-time gig? Are you still working full-time? And then what led you into the real estate investing you do?
Sure. I worked for about 11 years as a civil engineering tech. So that's a lot of drafting and design, AutoCAD, Civil 3D. And I would also do field inspection on big municipal projects during the summer months. So I did that for, about 11 years at a couple different companies. And then last September, I left my career to go into real estate investing full time. So kind of when I started, the very first project I purchased was an infill severance oriented project, which I'm now actually building out as we speak right now. So
this is sort of the first severance project you did, or is this one of many? Like, where does this fall in the chronology of you as an investor?
Sure. So this was the first one I bought. I severed that one, but then I started purchasing other ones, which I've also severed. So the first one I bought took a few years before I actually put shovel in the ground to start doing a new construction on it.
Okay. And did you have other rental projects before that, or is this the first kind of that falls in as an investment real estate?
That was my first. It kind of became my first rental by default because the way this one worked, it's in the city of Woodstock. My mom and her husband owned a duplex on a corner lot. And this corner lot was very deep. It was about 150 feet back. So we ended up looking at, can we sever their rear yard onto the adjacent street? The answer was no, it wasn't deep enough, although there would be plenty of frontage. They said you would have to purchase the property next door and use part of its backyard. A couple years went by, the property next door went for sale, and I snagged that thing right away because I'd been eyeing this up for years. So when you talk about my first rental, it was the existing house that became my first rental on that.
Nice. Okay, so you bought this house next to it in Woodstock. I actually went to high school in Woodstock, lived there for a while. You did?
Yeah.
Huh. Your name looked familiar. Are we similar age?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Maybe we've crossed paths in the past. Okay, so you found these two properties. Well, you now have two, and then what was the next step? Like, they were both single family homes?
My mom's was a duplex, which would have been a single family home at one point, and mine was a single family home. So kind of the process I went through on that is when I purchased that home, I didn't just purchase it blindly. As a drafter and a civil tech oriented person, I actually went and found all the online information, the digital mapping, infrastructure data, and I drew up a drawing ahead of time, which I presented to the planning department for Oxford County, which is Woodstock, and I had them comment on it before I actually purchased the property. So the city already gave me the yes, we would support this. And then I purchased the house. So
Is that the first of the two that you bought, or that was the second of the two?
That was the first one I bought, but it was both a combination of my mom's property plus mine. So we ended up severing the rear yards off of both of those houses, and we actually got two lots out of that.
So how did your mom come into this equation? Because I thought you bought the one on the corner and then bought the one beside it. That's what I thought. Okay.
No, she owned the one on the corner just as as an investment.
Okay.
And then I kind of got involved, and we started looking at this whole severance thing.
Okay. All right. So then you worked it out. So before she bought that one, you had already eyed it up.
No, before I bought mine. So I bought the second one.
Oh, the second one.
She had just bought that as an investment for her and her husband. So.
Okay, so then you just worked out a deal to buy it from her, or
no,
cut her in on the
partners
profit?
with me.
Okay, so partnered with them on it.
Yep.
Okay, so you got into that. Now you have two properties. Are you managing both, like while they're rental properties?
Yeah, and honestly, it's been a huge leg up during the new construction because I have the yards of the existing properties to store stuff on, to work on. One interesting thing about this project, it has kind of been a grading nightmare. There's a huge crossfall across the property, which had me building a 10-foot high retaining wall just to make this infill happen.
Oh, wow.
Still worth it all day long, but it's definitely like a challenge I had to account for when doing this.
Okay, so talk to me about what you sent to the city, like to start before you bought it. What you sketched it out. You kind of sketched in how you would be connecting services and things like that, or like what did you give them?
So what I gave them, and I'll kind of walk you through how I go about this, because I do this repeatedly when I go after severance projects, is I'll go online and I'll find the digital mapping. So every county, city pretty much has digital mapping. And I guess just a tip, if you find a city or a town that doesn't, you can still find digital mapping maybe through the River Conservation Authority, or there's other resources that you can still find it, or even double check the mapping. So I'll go through, I will find the property, look at the size of it. Next thing I do is look at the zoning. And then I look at like what's required to sever or to do an infill development. So the first thing I look at is like, what's the required frontage?
Yeah.
Do I have enough? Am I close? What's the required area? Again, do I have enough? Am I close? Right. So that's kind of how I start with it.
So you're starting, and if you don't have enough, then it's, well, maybe I can still do it minor variance. Do you ever go after a minor variance when you don't quite meet the requirements?
All the time. And this one in Woodstock ended up needing 5 minor variances, which the city was all in support of, because this was going to be 2 lots right downtown Woodstock, right? So the city had an appetite for this kind of infill. The other thing I'd say when it comes to minor variances, sometimes it's possible to get a sense ahead of time if the city is going to support it or not. And the way to do that is to go look up what they have been supporting. So what I did in Woodstock, someone was doing a very similar one to mine. I went to the committee of adjustment meeting. I sat there, I watched the whole thing, kind of watched how it went down, saw what they approved for that one. And I've kind of done that time and time again.
That's a smart thing to do. Actually, that would probably be very time well worthwhile, like to spend as a wannabe investor or developer. Go to those meetings, find out when the meetings are for those relevant projects. How do you find out about those meetings?
It's even easier now since the whole pandemic thing. Everything's moved online, so you don't even have to go in person. So a lot of times I can go on YouTube and find past meetings. But even more useful than that, they just post their agendas and their minutes, right? So I'll might look through meeting minutes and see, okay, this guy did a severance. They gave him a 2-meter minor variance on frontage. Well, I only need 1.5 meters.
Yeah.
So I know I'm sitting pretty well.
So you have a pretty good feel as to whether or not the city officials will support it, because it's very similar to what they've supported in the past. But that's only one part of the requirement, right? Because the city officials need to support it. They circulate documents to the committee. And then the committee also hears the residents if they have objections. But they're supposed to be objective with regard to the nature of a minor variance, right? Some of these people just say, I don't like that. Exactly. Sometimes that works, though. Sometimes that works, right?
It does, and I can comment on that. So far, all the severing I've done, I've actually had very little pushback. But when it comes to neighbors or anyone pushing back on your development, your severance, your minor variance, the only thing they can actually bring up that really carries any water, again, for the most part, is it has to be a planning related reason. It has to be that the city has this kind of density target here and this development's going to put us over. Like, it has to be actually rooted in planning reasons. It can't just be, I've lived here for 30 years, I don't want a house there. That really doesn't fly. And no matter how mad the neighborhood gets, if what you're doing is consistent with what the city wants in their official plan, their zoning, and what the province wants, you've got a very good chance of getting it through.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people say, 99% of the time, if city officials support it, it's likely to go through. Now, I'm sure that varies by municipality. I'm sure there's some that are just wild cards.
Yep.
But so that's the key thing. Because if the city officials, say the people in zoning or the people in the building department don't agree, or they have a problem with it, like you did, it's probably better to circulate that to them ahead of time. Say, do you have any issue with this? Or how would you like to see it changed if you need it changed? Yeah.
One other thing to consider too is, like, when a property is listed, you don't have a lot of time, right? Typically you're in multiples. You don't have a lot of time. Cities can be very slow to get back to you as well. So in a perfect world, you would take your inquiry to the city, have them comment on it. But that, again, when you're looking at something on market, that's not always possible. So that's especially where finding meeting minutes and stuff like that, and seeing what they have been approving can be extremely helpful. If you're looking at something off market and you have some time, get some drawings, go talk to the planners and do what you need to do.
So you basically need to know what you're doing beforehand.
It helps big time.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing about becoming an expert, right? If you're an expert, or you sort of take the time to shadow experts and sort of become a little bit of an expert yourself, then when you see an opportunity, you can recognize it. But so many people, I think they haven't seen enough deals to know what's a deal, right? And you don't know until you look at a bunch. I mean, how likely is it that somebody's going to go out and buy the first property that they researched from a development standpoint?
It's tough. And you know what? There's a lot of pitfalls and there's a lot of ways to swing and miss on stuff like this. Like, I'll give you one example. Like, sometimes I find realtors are quick to use terminology, things like double lot and severance, but you don't necessarily know if they've checked on the zoning. You don't know that maybe you need a couple minor variances and the town you're in are not approving them. Like, when I go through this, I've actually, like, kind of systematized it to some degree, and, like, I can kind of walk you through how I look at one of these from start to finish. kind of the way I look at it is, like I previously said, I look at like the size of the property and the zoning. That's number one. Because if it's too small or it doesn't conform by a long shot, then it's kind of a non-starter. But there's a lot of other things that can burn you as well when it comes to this. And one would be, is the property in a River Conservation Authority's jurisdiction?
Yeah, avoid those.
For the most part, but it's not a complete no either.
If you need a minor variance, my experience is that it's just pretty much a no. Like if you're intensifying in a floodplain, say, it's like that was my experience in London. It was an immediate no if you needed a minor variance. If you conformed with zoning, then they would approve it as long as you met certain requirements.
It also depends too, like if your whole property is in the River Conservation Authority. For example, I looked at one where the rear of the property was, the front of the property was not. And if you kept your development out of their jurisdiction, you'd be fine. There's other stipulations they can put on you that might not be an outright no. But if you're in a River Conservation Authority's jurisdiction, you may not be able to regrade that area. They don't like you regrading. So what that could mean for you is maybe you have to build a big retaining wall in order to not change the grading in their jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
Just to your point on floodplains too, like, yeah, typically you can't build traditional residential in floodplains, but that's not to say you can't build anything ever. There might be solutions where you do a garage main level and build something on top of it, because that way there's no living space on the main level, right?
Interesting.
And there's a big difference too between being in a floodplain and being in a River Conservation Authority's jurisdiction. So if you're in the jurisdiction, again, like I said, they can put various stipulations on you. They could maybe make you do monitoring wells to check the groundwater, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's an outright no.
Okay.
It's 100% something you want to check for, though.
Yeah, just be aware of it, know how it might slow you down, and then talk to those people ahead of time. Or find whoever in those offices you need to speak with, and then bring them a coffee if they'll take it. The couple other like things you could really get burned on is infrastructure. So making sure that it's there. Like you're saying, sewers are there.
Sewers and water. So like, for example, I looked at one in London, and it was on a street that had been there forever, but it was a corner lot. And so the severance would be onto the corner lot. Well, the corner lot didn't have sewer and water on it, right? So you would have to pay to extend the sewer main and water main a ways down that side street.
And there goes your profit.
There goes your profit. That's very expensive to do. Like another one would be like more rural places. Maybe they're on water main, but maybe they're still on septic. And so that can cause some problems, because if you're completely rural, you might have to do a septic and well, which is very expensive. One that I came across, I did another one in Wasaga Beach, and their zoning was completely contingent upon if there is water, if there is sanitary or not. So if there was water and sanitary, the square meters that you needed was only like 460. If there was no water main and sewer, it was like 10 times that, because you had to support a well and septic bed.
Yeah, the issue would be the septic engineer probably needs drainage, right? They need a certain, like if you have sandy soil, you barely need any space, but if it's more like clay, then you need tons of space.
Septic beds in general just require quite a bit of space and a buffer around that. So.
Not so much in Florida. Well, not where I'm, because it's all sand. So they just got like I've actually seen them. They're only like, I don't know, 25 feet by 25 feet, the whole bed.
It's crazy. They don't even bury their water mains there. Like they're literally on ground. Oh yeah,
you have water mains coming right out of the front lawn. So I think, traditionally they would be quite expensive. It's a little cheaper down where I'm building down there, just because of the way they're doing them, which is nice.
There's, I guess, like before I move off from the infrastructure component here, sometimes too, when you see a property that can be severed, there's like a reason why no one's done it before. And one of the reasons could be, is there a giant sewer under the side lot? Is there a big water main under there? And it's like, how do you know about that? Well, there are ways to find that out. And
the city's infrastructure map, right? They have.
Yes, but the problem with that is not many cities just give you their infrastructure on mapping. I know Hamilton's very good that way, but the majority, in my experience, do not. So there's a couple ways around that. One, if you have enough time, you can reach out to the city and ask for one of their engineering drawings, which will show you what's the infrastructure in the road. But the really quick cheater way to do this is you can use Google Street View and you can look on it.
Manhole covers.
So like if the sanitary manholes are always in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
Water. And so the other thing too is
storm sewers.
Storm sewers are always on the side and water's usually on the side. But the other thing too is we've all seen this time and time again where they've paint marked the infrastructure, right? So you might be able to go on Google Street View and see a bunch of blue lines running down the road, right?
Yeah.
And let's say, and this actually happened to me. I was looking at a property in my hometown and had a very obvious severance. And I was kind of looking at it like, why has no one done this? It was for sale. And I went on Google Street View. I didn't see any like hard evidence of infrastructure there. So I went back in time on Google Street View, and sure enough, there's a big blue line running right across the side of the property. So, and I was right. There was a big water main under there, and it was not developable.
Oh, okay.
So that's things you can do. You can look for hydrants and whatnot. Like you can pretty much figure out infrastructure.
Yeah, you gotta get a little crafty about how you find answers to what you need. And I remember doing a lot of that when I was adding additions in London. You have to be able to quickly size up a property and figure out what can I do here. Is it possible to develop? Obviously, you're taking that to the next step. There's a lot more moving parts when it comes with infrastructure. And so obviously the best thing to do is be able to talk to the city here because you don't want to make these mistakes. Not everybody can. One other thing that you'll want to watch out for is capacity, because I've run into this with one of the projects I was working on for a developer, is that they didn't yet have sewage capacity for all the units they had site plan approval for. So it was approved as soon as capacity was there. So it's like, yes, you're approved, just wait until we bring capacity in.
It's a good point. I find with the small stuff, the little ones like and
a one-off,
twos,
it's not likely to be a problem.
Yeah, they're not likely to say too much to you about that, but you're 100% correct. If you're going to do a larger build, I don't know, maybe you're a dozen units plus, yeah, they might bring the capacity issue to you. But again, if you can get the engineering drawing ahead of time, or for example, Hamilton has it, even as a bit of a layman, when you see that there's a sanitary sewer and it's only 6 inches big, you can kind of infer that that's not great.
Oh, like this sanitary main.
It gives you the sizes of everything on that kind of stuff. So.
Right. So this is stuff that in my experience comes from looking at drawings, asking questions, looking at drawings some more, asking questions, doing more research, and kind of doing case study properties, and even bringing it to them. Say, hey, if I wanted to do this here, would you guys support it? I used to do that all the time. It's a great way to learn from the city, and they'll just basically teach you for free, and like they're paid by tax dollars, so they're good with it. Yeah, so that, I mean, obviously you've got yourself a process. Is there anything like you'd say to people beyond what you've already said that would sort of help them avoid a mistake? In this market, I know the market's sort of cooling down a bit, but what could you suggest?
If you kind of, like I said, kind of go through that process I just talked about, and just kind of really do your homework on it. You can educate yourself enough to kind of figure it out. Like I help people all the time with kind of looking at properties as well and kind of figuring out the severability. I've purchased a few of them just sight unseen because I've trusted the due diligence enough to do that. So
yeah, once you get more comfortable, that's on the table. Maybe not right away.
No, I wouldn't do that right away.
Okay, so in terms of you had mentioned if something's too small or if it's not wide enough, like can you give an idea of what in your mind is too small when you're looking at a lot to consider it as a possible severance? It
is so up in the air. Like I'll give you Hamilton, for example. Like their zoning typically requires 12 meters
of frontage.
But they're regularly approving 25-foot lots in the lower city. That's like just shy of 8. Yeah. So that's quite a minor variance. But you could go to the next city and maybe they require 12 meters and you want to bump it down to 11. And they might say, no, we've been denying all of these. We don't want this. You know what I mean? So that's where kind of talking to the planners and looking at past decisions can really save you on that.
Used to really frustrate me when the people in the building department or in zoning would say, oh yeah, you just got to go for a minor variance. I'm like, But what is the likelihood of getting a yes on that minor variance? Oh, I don't know. Just go, here's the fee. If you speak with the right people, they, that have approved these or have commented on other files, they should know, right?
Like one thing too, like you might have an admin person in the planning department go, oh yeah, like you just said, no problem, go for a minor variance. But the planner might be like, oh, we wouldn't support that. You know what I mean? You gotta keep in mind of who you're talking to as well. And even then, you'd mentioned earlier, like there are rare occasions where the planning department might support an application and the committee of adjustment may still turn it down. Yeah. For whatever reason, whether it's right or wrong, it could be a personal dislike, which I don't think's fair, but I'm sure it's happened.
Oh yeah, that's the 1%. I heard 99% if the city supports it, the committee will, but there's that 1%, and maybe in other cities it's more than 1%. So you just gotta keep your eyes open. But yeah, that would be the unfortunate. So and that's the other question I have for you, because there are no guarantees. What are you doing to kind of have a plan B here? If plan A is development, what's plan B, and does it work, and how does it work?
Yeah, you definitely need to have a backup plan here. So like, for example, if you're going to go after a house that you're just hoping to sever off a side yard per se, and let's say you find out the hard way that you can't, you definitely want to go into that going, okay, can I throw this back up on the market for what I paid for it? Can I wholesale this? Can I duplex convert this? Can I do a garden suite on it? You know what I mean? Maybe I can't sever it, but maybe I can still get that third unit through another avenue. You definitely have to have secondary plans. And the other point I'd make as well is sometimes when people list properties, they know what they have. They know they have a side yard that can be severed, or at least they suspect that. And sometimes they'll charge a premium for that. I've seen lots of listings where maybe the house would be worth $500,000, but they charge $800,000 because they're already priced in a severed lot. You can't pay premiums like that for that kind of stuff, because if you're mistaken and you can't get that lot, you just got burned very, very bad. Yeah. So that's something you got to watch out for.
Everyone who lists properties, almost everybody, seems to want to just get the absolute most out of it, right? So if they do know, they're going to build in a price. Anytime I look at somebody selling something with development potential, or they've gone into site plan and I see the price they want a number that wouldn't make sense even if my costs were, as tight as possibly could be. Like that's where they start, at unreasonable. So that if you don't know your numbers, you're just going to get into something and get burned, unless values just keep going up like they have been, and then the time saves you.
Yeah, like another thing you want to watch out for too is, are you going to negatively affect the value of the existing house to the point where it's problematic, right? So if you have a 100-foot frontage and you cut 50 off, are you going to knock the value of the existing house down by $100,000? And is that a problem? In my experience, that actually hasn't happened. I've been fortunate that way, but it can and it will happen, especially if a property is valued on being such a nice big property and you're going to take half of it. You could definitely negatively affect the existing house too. So that's something you absolutely have to factor in as well.
Yeah, definitely want to watch out for that. How many of these have you done so far? I guess not a lot of them are complete, but you're in the process. How many have you done so far?
Sure. So like my history on this is I severed 2 lots in Woodstock, which I'm currently building semis on, and I hope to do basement suites there. So I'm trying to build 4 units. I did another one where I tore a house down and split the lots into just 2 building lots, and I flipped the land.
Where was that one?
Elmira.
Okay. I saw one I was looking at for that type of thing in London. I was wondering if it was a one, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The numbers on that one are interesting because tearing down and splitting doesn't always pencil out extremely well, especially in today's market. And we can circle back to that. The other one I did, this was the most straightforward traditional one. I bought a property in Wasaga Beach that was 100 feet frontage by 150 feet deep. The house was completely on one side, no minor variances, nothing, just severed a 50 foot by 150 foot lot.
Beautiful.
That one was easy going. So
yeah, if only we could get a few more like that. So in that case, why didn't somebody else do that?
That's a really good question. You know what I mean? As most wholesales are, the house was very rough condition, as was the whole property. That one there, I bought sight unseen. I did my standard due diligence on it. Saw that, this looks like a slam dunk of a severance. So as to why no one else did it, I'm not completely sure. I don't think the previous owners had a lot of money or maybe wherewithal to do it. But that's kind of how I came about it.
Okay. So next question I have is, you quit your job, obviously. What are you doing? Like, what's your primary income strategy? How often are you actually getting paid? Or, my experience with this type of thing is that there are long waits in between paychecks when you're flipping properties, when you're developing properties, even longer. So how does that work for you?
It's a good question. You're right. From the real estate side of things, like from my own investments, I probably get paid once, twice, whatever a year. But some of the other stuff I do is the water sub-metering is a source of income for me as well. And actually the Wasaga one, I was the first one I took partners on outside of my parents. And they're doing a lot of infills and some bigger stuff. So I've kind of worked with them, team up with them, kind of as an employee, but I've got the opportunity to hop in on anything I want as well. So that's kind of those three things is what keeps me going right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you said you were working with another guest we've had on this show before, Charles.
Yes, yeah, and it's been great. We connected over the severance thing. They were kind of doing the same thing I was, and I just reached out and it came together.
So it's Charles and then his business partner.
Steve Ford.
Steve golfed with those guys a couple of times. They're great people.
Steve's been a big help with the new build, especially because it's my first, and he's quite knowledgeable. So.
Yeah, Steve's like the super, the execution, construction side of things. Charles is obviously doing more like what you're doing, and the oversight on the development and severances and all that stuff.
Yep.
Okay, so they're working on the Wasaga one?
It's done, actually. We can kind of go through that one if you wish.
Yeah.
It's, so essentially, we purchased that for $410 from a wholesaler.
So this is the whole property.
Yeah, the whole property.
Okay, so $410 purchase.
Yep.
Okay, and
just so you're aware, 20 of that was a wholesale fee.
Yep.
So when we mortgaged on that, we could only go up to 80% of 390,000.
Gotcha.
Since I was still working at the time, I got an A-rate mortgage on that, which was about $1,150 a month.
Okay.
Property taxes were nothing up there. Yeah. They were $1,500 for the year.
Well, let's go through, like, conceptually, you bought it, operated it as a rental while you developed it, or did you just get right into the...
No, the house, like I said, the house was pretty beat up. So,
so you just started renovating?
We started renovating it.
Okay.
We thought about tearing it down, but you know what? When you look at these, tearing down when you pencil these out almost never makes sense compared to keeping the house.
Yeah,
is as long as you can fix it up to the point that is livable.
Okay, so what was the existing house there? Was it like a bungalow? It was an older house?
It was a slab on grade. Like no frost wall, like literal slab on grade, 2-bedroom, small kind of cottage like thing. It was about 900 square feet.
Okay, so a small little thing. What did you have into renovating that one?
About 50,000.
So you had 50,000 into that, and then you would have had carrying costs for the whole parcel over the time frame you guys did it. What would you estimate that would have been?
Like I said, the mortgage carrying costs about $1,500 a month, so times 12.
Okay, and then any other costs, like you would have had some soft costs, some survey, some drafting costs. What did you get into for costs to go ahead with the severance?
So survey ran me just shy of $4,000 on that. As a drafter, I've got a big leg up on this stuff because I take the survey and do my own severance plans. And the other thing I haven't mentioned yet is I've represented myself at the Committee of Adjustment on everything I've ever done. I think the majority of people hire a planner, which can run you 10, 15,000 even on a small project like this. But to date, I've only ever represented myself. So I saved those
So in this
costs.
one, you went and did the meeting yourself.
Yep.
Okay. And that one would have been an easy one to support because there's no minor variance needed.
And that's why, like, if I ever ran into trouble with the city or they weren't in support, I would hire a planner. It's just as of right now, I've had very little resistance in the stuff I've done.
Oh, and you learn so much better what you can and can't do by doing it yourself.
Yeah.
But of course, like there are other people who always hire a planner and that works really well for them. So at scale, you're probably going to want to hire help.
So I would say getting to the point of approval, to approval for the severance, that cost me about $9,000. Just survey, some legal costs, and the application fees.
Yeah, what were the legal costs and the application fees?
Legal costs around $3,000.
Yeah.
The application actually wasn't too bad. It was only around $2,000. But if you're in a situation where you need minor variances, those can add up quickly.
On top of that, yeah.
And some cities will give you they'll charge you once for minor variances.
As many as you want.
Other cities might charge you for each and every minor variance. So that can add up quick.
Okay. So for you, it was basically, I think you said it was a $50,000 reno. Mm-hmm. You had $1,500 for 12 months carrying costs, $4,000 plus $3,000 plus $2,000. That's pretty much the project.
Yep.
So you kept it tight there. So you're in for like $77,000 and get a lot out of it.
That was to get to approval. So there's still more that comes.
Did you build? Oh, you built?
No. I flipped this one. I flipped the house and the land.
Okay, so tell me what else.
So the back end of this story was we essentially, once you get approval to sever a property, they're going to stick you with a whole bunch of conditions that you have to fulfill. And once again, go look at the meeting minutes from prior decisions, because you're going to see right away what conditions are going to stick you with. So standard things are like, you have to produce an R plan, which is like a legal survey that's going to get registered on title. Mm-hmm. That's standard everywhere. That's not overly expensive. There's other stuff like proving that there's no infrastructure under there, which can be done with locates if you go that route. But the big one, and this varies wildly by city, are they going to make you service the new lot as part of a condition, or can you do it at the time of building permit? Okay. So the one thing I'll add here is typically you only have 1 year to fulfill all your conditions, which is not a lot of time actually when it comes to how much work can be involved with this. Mm-hmm. So Wasaga did make us service the new lot.
Tap into the main, bring into the lot line,
bring a new water service in, bring a new sanitary service in. Yeah. Now the problem with that is a lot of places won't let you do it over the winter. Yeah. Right. So you don't even have that year that you think you have. Contractors are as busy as ever. So that one was a scramble. We just got that done this spring, and had already accepted offers on both the lot and the house. Okay. So in order to complete the severance, I had to complete the servicing. Yeah. Which we did. I got it done, but close call on that one. Yeah. So
did you have to bring in electrical as well, or that's just separate?
No, but okay, good question. So on that one, there was an overhead wire to the existing house that crossed over the new lot. Okay. So we actually had to move that. Had to put a pole on the other side of the existing house. Yeah. So essentially, I had to move the hydro line, had to service the lot, do the standard things like I just talked about. And one other thing, definitely to note, is they're going to make you pay something called a Parkland Fee. And what it is, it's a kind of a theoretical fee that when builders do new subdivisions, they are required to allot 5% of the land for parkland. When you do an infill, that's not possible. So what they'll do is they're going to ask you for cash in lieu. Wasaga made us pay 5% of the appraised value of typically it's of the new lot, except Wasaga actually asked us for the whole property prior to severance. Oh, okay. Only place I've ever seen do that. But on the flip side of things, when I did the same thing in Woodstock, it was not a condition, it was part of building permit, and they just charged me $1,000 each. Okay. When I did the one in Elmira, I want to say it was 5% up to a maximum of $5,000. So it's not always as bad as it sounds, but like Wasaga, they took their whole 5%. So
okay. What did that amount to? Like
$19,500.
Okay, so you had $19,500 for that. You had, what was the cost to bring the service from the main to the lot line?
So far it's been $30,000, but I am expecting another $10,000 on top of that, because there was some extras on that.
Okay, so you've got basically $60,000 of costs at that level.
Yeah, about that.
Okay, and then you've got offers on both. So your total cost for acquisition, renovation, and approval and fulfilling your conditions is 546, but you got 2 properties to sell. So what were you able to sell them for?
We sold the existing house for $500,000.
Oh, that sounds like it's a good project already. Okay, what'd you sell the lot for?
$312,500.
I guess obviously there's going to be
there's realtor commissions in that as well.
Yeah, so you're going to pay a realtor 4%, 5%? 4? Okay. So times 0.04. And then you were going to have obviously all the costs in. So about $230,000 in profit, ballpark?
Yep, right around there. Now that's also before taxes. So when you sell land, HST can come into play here.
Okay.
So here's what I know about HST and the standard. I'm not an accountant line. But essentially, if it is in the process of a business, so a corporation, HST is going to apply. So we'll have to pay HST on the sale of the lot. Now, it's not a straight 13% loss because there was a lot of costs in getting this severed.
Yes.
Right. So I'll be able to claim some of that back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had around 230 before taxes.
230 before taxes. And then, so say your HST works out to be like 8%.
Sure.
So that'd be 25 grand.
Yep.
Okay. So you might be closer to 200, but that's still a pretty solid project for what was it, like a 1 year?
It was exactly 1 year.
Yeah. Now the market sort of did bless you a little bit here in terms of going up. If it hadn't gone up, do you where do you think that total number would have been? Like instead of 812,000 for the package, would you have been 700,000?
I could see that being the case.
Yeah. So you still would have been profitable, but the market just made it that much better.
It did. Like, I'll add one thing too to like these severance things is it does not require a lot of time. I'm not on site very much. It's kind of all from the desktop. Yeah, this one had a renovation component. The one I did in Elmira where I tore a house down, if I never showed up, I probably still could have done it because it's literally just you do the plans, hire a contractor, and I find these have a pretty good return on time when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds fantastic. How do you go about finding these, though? So obviously you become a little bit of an expert in the process, and it probably makes it easier to spot an opportunity. But where do you look to find one?
As always, on market's the one way to do it. But like I said, there's kind of 2 trains of thought there. One, there's properties where everyone and their brother can see that there's a severance there, and it's going to go for top dollar. But then there's other ones where...
It's more questionable, right?
There's that, or it's maybe people don't know you can sever a 25-foot lot, right? And people aren't looking at it like that. But the other one though is maybe there's an attached garage and all you have to do is rip the garage off of it and move the parking to the other side of the house, and you've got a lot there, and people don't look at that. Or maybe it's the house itself. Maybe there's like an addition that juts over and you're gonna have to rip 10 feet of the house off, but for a $300,000-$400,000 lot, depending what city you're in, it's worth it all day long. So.
Yeah. So it's just being able to work those numbers back quick. You want to be able to just pull out a sheet of paper back of the envelope and just crunch these numbers real quick to know if it even makes sense to pursue it.
Absolutely. And like there's other ones too. Like if you see a property that's like undoubtedly severable, like you can do the mailer, the door knock, like that kind of stuff too. I've tried unsuccessfully to date, but it'd be nice to do that because you're not under the gun on something like that. You have time to talk to the planners and do like your proper homework on it.
So you're saying like one approach could be just as you drive around or get to know neighborhoods, just make a list of properties you think would work, even if they're not for sale, and then just keep in contact with them if you can.
Even better, you can spot it on the same mapping that you use to do the due diligence on it.
Yeah, Google map it use your city's map and you'll see houses where they're skewed to one side of the lot and it looks like it might work. What's the smallest you would even functionally try to go with for a lot width?
The 25.
The 25.
Yep.
That's if you want to detach though, right? Like what if you wanted to do a semi? I guess you could get away with, but then you'd have to tear one down.
Yeah. I find 25 is kind of the cutoff, and even then 25 only flies in
some
a handful of cities.
Right. Yeah. Others, it's going to be a hard no. So whoever's listening and watching, talk to your city, like actually find out what's being approved. Look up at those meeting minutes and find out what they're approving.
The other thing I'd just say about finding these things too is especially in the cities, in the larger cities, the easy ones have all been done. I know everyone sees a corner lot and they go, I think I can sever that, but
someone's probably tried. Or like you might see a corner lot and it looks like you can fit a house there, and physically you probably could, but it's maybe only 60 feet deep and you need like 90 feet, right? So I find that when it comes especially to the larger cities, you have to get creative. So where I did that one in Wasaga, I literally did that by rights, no minor variances, anything. When you do it in the city, you're going to need minor variances almost certainly, or you can look at like what I did in Woodstock, where maybe you have to buy the 2 houses on the corner. The nice thing though is if you get the 2 houses on the corner, sometimes 2 lots start to become feasible. Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So the flip side to this is the small towns. Lots of these things around, you know what I mean? So it's
you're saying because people aren't paying as much attention to the smaller towns?
There's that, and I just find smaller towns are a little more haphazardly arranged. So
yes, 100%.
Where these become applicable is they're in older parts of town where it was developed 100 plus years ago, just kind of haphazardly, lot lines, just wherever. And those are where you're going to find these things. If you go, like, I'll use out west, for example, everything's on the grid system out there. And a lot of the cities there were laid out by the railways 100 years ago. There's not as much opportunities from what I've seen because it's just so cut and dry and excess land like you might see in around here. It just doesn't seem to be as available from what I've seen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to your note about the small towns, they're just not nearly as organized. Yep. The ways they do stuff is, I started dealing with London and then went into some of these smaller towns building, and it's actually kind of nice to deal with the smaller town. They're a little more flexible.
It's got its pros and cons. One, I have in my own experience found the smaller municipalities it easier to get on the phone with the planners. That's been my experience. I also find that their zoning, they require more. You're always going to need more frontage and area in the smaller towns. But the flip side of that is there usually is lots with more frontage and size to it. And depending on the town, there might be more pushback to you coming in and doing this. Hasn't really been my experience, but I've kind of heard and read a few things about that.
Okay. Awesome. Now, Dan, is there anything you hoped I'd ask you about that I have not asked you about yet?
No, that's largely it. Like, if you wanted to chat quick about the one where like I actually tore the house down, because I know a lot of people approach me about like that scenario as well.
Sure. You do the brief summary of what that looks like.
The long and short of that is when you sever a lot, like on a corner or a side yard, and you get to keep the house, and especially if you don't hurt the value too bad, you've just profited whatever that lot is worth. When you buy something that you have to tear down, you still paid money for that house, right? So, for example, like if you pay $430 for something, a tear down, and you see that lots that size are going for $250 each. Well, by the time you pay to demolish the house and
for $200,000 on top,
you've essentially just paid retail. Now, if you can maybe get the upper hand if you're a builder and you know what I mean, and can kind of make advancements on the build, but that's something you really got to watch for. The one though that I did in Elmira, I was able to pick that up for like $290, and I bought that repossessed off the bank. It was right when COVID rolled in, so I got fortunate to some degree because everyone kind of backed down for a little bit. But on that one there, I tore the house down, severed the lots, and I sold that for about $430. So I did well on it, but not even remotely so as much as when you get to keep the house and sever the lot. That's kind of the gold standard when it comes to this. So
the house has got to be worth a lot. I mean, but again, it's basic back of the envelope numbers, right? What in the current market is the average house selling for, the average lot selling for? Just work those numbers out. Does it make sense for me to pay this? No, I got to tear the house down, pay these planning costs. Am I going to make profit, and am I happy with that? So Cool. All right. So Dan, where do people reach you or follow you if they want to know more, learn more, or just follow you in general?
Sure. A few different spots. Instagram is Illes_invest, and my last name is ILLES. My website is waterbillsolutions.com, and anyone can feel free to add me on Facebook as well.
Cool. Awesome. And final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just double check this time and time again if you want to go through one of these, and don't get the shiny object syndrome either. Like this is great, but just make sure it is something you legitimately want to do. If it is something you're thinking about,
yeah. If you're going to build it into your business, have a plan.
Absolutely,
have a plan and make sure it fits. Okay, Dan, thanks a lot. It was really nice to finally meet you. I know we've been talking for a while, and looking forward to seeing how you do with the rest of these projects.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Please make sure to share this episode far and wide. Help it help more people. I really appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.